July 2023, and for my final weekend in Buckinghamshire, I've headed to High Wycombe to explore tiny towns, mysterious caves, and a former Prime Minister's mansion. Remains of a Roman villa dating from the 2nd century have been unearthed close to the River Wye, to the east of the modern town centre of High Wycombe. The town itself is first recorded in the latter part of the 10th century with a settlement called Wycombe. The parish church was consecrated by the Bishop of Worcester in 1086, with the town being described as a borough from the 1180s. A market hall was first built in the town in 1476. The centre of town is now dominated by the 18th century built Guildhall, which was completed in 1757, and the earlier 17th century Little Market House, which was remodelled at the same time as the Guildhall was being built, with a remodelling completed in 1761. In medieval and Tudor times, the town was a mill town, manufacturing lace and linen, as well as an important stop on the route from London to Oxford. Due to the high levels of chalk in the Wye's waters, aiding in the bleaching of pulp, the paper industry boomed in the town in the 17th and 18th centuries. From the 19th century, the main industry in the town was furniture, in particular the manufacture of Windsor chairs. In 1875, it was estimated there were nearly 5,000 chairs a day being churned out by the factories across the town. The town's history is expanded upon in the Wycombe Museum, located on the hill above the town's railway station in an 18th century house surrounded by Victorian gardens. The museum arranges its collection in chronological order, using 10 key objects to illustrate the different periods of time, starting with the flint axe head of the prehistoric period. A Roman oil lamp, a Saxon pendant, items from a medieval mill, Tudor manufactured lace, a Restoration era mace, the original Red Lion from above the door of the Georgian era hotel of the same name, examples of Victorian chairs, models of World War II planes, recognising the role of RAF High Wycombe as the seat of RAF Bomber Command from 1940 through to 1968. And finally, a rosette from Wycombe Wanderers' FA Cup run in 2001 that saw them making it to the semi-final. 3 miles to the west of High Wycombe is the small village of West Wycombe. The village is mostly set alongside the A40 Oxford Road, with much of the property now being owned by the National Trust to help preserve the historic fabric of the village. The village sits next to West Wycombe Park, a stately home built at the latter end of the 18th century by Sir Francis Dashwood, one-time Chancellor of the Exchequer, and more infamously known, based on the morals of the time, as a bit of a rake and a libertine, or if you're being generous, a bon vivant. The parties he hosted were, if rumours of the time to be believed, more akin to bacchanalian orgies. Along with the house down in the valley, Sir Francis also set about transforming the hills behind the village. The top of the hill had long been the site of a church, St Lawrence, that had previously served the village of Haveringdon, which had long since disappeared. In the 1750s, Francis raised the tower to make it taller and topped it off with a golden ball visible from the estate, and reportedly used as a meeting place for his Hellfire Club, as the ball could hold up to 10 people. Just below the churchyard is the family mausoleum that he also had built in 1765. The open-air mausoleum is built on the site of a former Iron Age hill fort and now houses the urns containing the ashes of the Dashwood family. But it's what's underneath the hill, the church and mausoleum top, that the village is probably more famous for. In the late 1740s, to combat local poverty, Sir Francis commissioned a project to supply chalk to create a straight, 3-mile-long road between West Wycombe and High Wycombe, dramatically improving this stretch of the London to Oxford Road. Local farm workers, hit by a succession of droughts and failed harvests, were employed to dig chalk out of the hill. In the process of digging, the mining works created a series of chambers and corridors that appear to have been very specifically planned to follow a specific course to create an underground meeting place for Dashwood's Hellfire Club. The Order of the Friars of St Francis of Wycombe, though these days more commonly known as the Hellfire Club, was founded by Sir Francis Dashwood in 1746 and met in different locations before eventually moving into the caves. The club's motto was Fais ce que tu voudras, or do what you will, and contemporary reports suggest that members took this to heart, practising pagan rituals to Bacchus and Venus, including much drinking, wenching and banqueting. Today it's possible to explore the caves all the way to the final chamber, located directly below St Lawrence's Church. Along the way you pass through the different chambers and halls, some of which are of impressive size, especially when you remember these were carved out of chalk by hand in the 18th century. The banqueting hall is the largest and most impressive of the chambers that you encounter on the way down. Along the way you can also meet some of the visitors to the cave in the days of the Hellfire Club, perhaps the most famous being American founding father Benjamin Franklin. At the end of the passageways, you reach the inner sanctum of the system and of the Hellfire Club, accessed by crossing a small stream called the River Styx, in reference to the ancient Greek mythological river of the underworld. From a Georgian politician and rogue in West Wycombe, a short hop across country takes you to Hughenden, the stately home of a significantly more statesman-like Victorian politician, twice Prime Minister and Earl of Beaconsfield, Benjamin Disraeli. The manor of Hughenden is first recorded in the Domesday Book in 1086, having been recorded as lands previously owned by Queen Edith, wife of Edward the Confessor and sister of Harold, the last Anglo-Saxon king of England, killed at the Battle of Hastings. After passing through various hands, the manors and lands returned to the Crown in the 14th century, who kept them for nearly 200 years before they were granted to Sir Robert Dormer in 1539. His family kept the lands until 1737, when they were sold to Charles Savage. The lands passed through the extended family until they ended up in the hands of John Norris. On John's death, the lands were brought from the executors of his estate in 1847 by Isaac Disraeli, father of Benjamin. The purchase was supported by a loan of £25,000, equivalent to £1.5 million in today's money, with the manor and debt passing to Benjamin on his father's death the following year. But it was essential for Benjamin's career progression, as it was essential that as leader of the Conservative Party he represented the county, and county members had to be landowners. Disraeli and his wife Mary Ann would alternate between Hughenden and homes in London for the rest of their lives, with Mary Ann passing away in 1872, followed 9 years later by Benjamin. Both are buried in a vault in the adjacent churchyard of St Michael and All Angels Church. The Disraelis had no children, so Hughenden was left to his nephew, Coningsby Disraeli. After his death in 1936, the house was sold to W.H. Abbey, who vested it, with the remaining contents and some of the land, to the Disraelian Society. In 1947, the Abbey family and the Disraelian Society gifted the house and contents over to the National Trust, who continue to look after the property to today, with the interior restored to how it would have looked when Benjamin and Mary Ann were living there, along with exhibitions on the life and work of the former Prime Minister. The actual house was built towards the end of the 18th century, but was remodelled in 1862 by the Disraelis. And until 2004, that was all the history of the house that was known and understood. Until a chance overheard conversation of a visitor that year led to a secret history that had been kept hidden for over 60 years coming to light. Pressed into service during World War II using the code name Hillside, the house was used as a centre for the analysis of aerial photography and using that for map making for nearby Bomber Command, including the maps used in the planning and execution of the Dam Busters raids. In the grounds, there's further evidence of the war work where the former ice house had been converted into a studio for developing the films of aerial photography. Four and a half miles to the southeast of High Wycombe is the town of Bekonsfield, and within the town of Beaconsfield is the much smaller town of Bekonscot, a miniature model village and railway that's been a visitor's attraction ever since the first buildings were created in the 1920s. Entering the site, the first thing you're greeted by is the more recent 21st century 7¼ gauge miniature railway, which you can ride for a quick tour around parts of the site as it loops past a couple of displays. The main park itself is beyond the miniature railway and is arranged into a number of themed areas, linked together by model railway that weaves its way through the different villages and towns of the site. Bekonscot, a portmanteau of Beaconsfield and Ascot, traces its history back to the early 1920s, when Roland Callingham's model railway hobby had annoyed his wife enough that she instructed him to take it outside of their house. So, having already purchased land to extend their garden, he, assisted by his gardener, moved the railway out into the garden and then built an ideal English village around it, with everything being built to a 1 inch to 1 foot scale. One person's personal passion turned into a money-spinning venture after Roland opened his garden to the general public in 1929, and within 3 years it was a popular tourist attraction. In 1942, Miss Calman, housekeeper to the Callinghams, took over the day-to-day running of the village. Over the years, the site was constantly updated with new models depicting the latest changes in building styles and vehicles being added. However, in 1992, the decision was taken to stop keeping the site up to date and instead revert to a 1930s time warp of a former England long since departed. Some more modern buildings have been added, but the trains, cars and dress and model people still retain their 1930s feel. The site is now arranged into different themed areas. The original Bekonscot has been joined by Evenlode, Newtown and Colliery, Epwood, Green Haley, Hanton, Southpool and Spleeshing. The zoo is another portmanteau, being called Chesnade, after Chessington and Whipsnade zoos. One of the other major features of the site are the names of some of the stores, many of which are deliberate puns, such as Mr. Ball's China Shop, Hakes and Payne's Chemist, Dandelion the Florist, and greengrocer Crispy Lettuce. High Wycombe is on the Chiltern Main Line from London Marylebone to Oxford, Banbury, Warwick and Birmingham. Chiltern Railways run regular services into Marylebone, taking between 30 and 60 minutes depending on the number of stops. There are at least hourly services to Birmingham Moor Street, taking 90 minutes, with some additional services to Moor Street and Snow Hill, as well as 2 trains an hour to Oxford, taking around 50 minutes. From High Wycombe Coachway, a mile south of the town centre, Oxford buses run airline coaches every 20 minutes to Heathrow Airport, with 1 hour extended to Gatwick Airport. On direct coaches, Terminal 5 is just a 30 minutes journey, with a central bus station being reached in 45. Gatwick coaches reach Heathrow Central first in 45 minutes, and Terminal 5 10 minutes later. Gatwick South and North terminals about 2 hours after leaving High Wycombe.